Here is Nile Gardiner, director of the Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom at the Heritage Foundation. Trudeau was never really a pillar of liberalism, Nile, but it looks like he might be a dangerous dictator underneath it all.
Well, Dagan, thanks very much for having me on the show today. And I have to say, it's immensely sad to see what is happening in Canada at this time. I mean, Canada was once a nation that really stood for freedom and for liberty. But right now, you have Justin Trudeau really acting like a little mini tyrant, basically suppressing freedom of speech, suppressing freedom of movement, invoking these new emergency powers, an extraordinary measure, the sort of measures that are introduced, generally speaking, by authoritarian regimes that want to crush dissent. And so now, Trudeau wants to appear as some kind of Canadian, strongman acting against Canadian truckers of all people. So it's just a very, very sad scene. And even more sad to see, I mean, a great nation like Canada being run by, a far left sort of woke government that doesn't really understand what freedom is all about. And the measures that are being taken against these truckers, I think, should really worry anyone who believes in freedom and democracy. And needless to say, I think there are large numbers of people in the United States, but also in Great Britain as well, across the English-speaking world, who are speaking out against what the Canadian government is doing. And I just saw actually a tweet earlier today by a British Member of Parliament actually urging the British government to speak directly to the Canadian government to put pressure on them to back away from these authoritarian, very dangerous measures. So, we're seeing condemnation from across the free world here. And, Justin Trudeau is behaving like a very petty individual, as you mentioned, a sort of emperor, Canadian emperor in many respects. And, I can't believe actually the Canadian people will tolerate this nonsense for much longer.
With respect to the Queen, who's been on the throne for 70 years, it looks like that Trudeau said, "Daddy, I want to grow up and be an emperor, a king, so I can order everybody around and issue edicts and proclamations from on high." It's quite pathetic and shows a lack of understanding of history. And that's my next question now. Even if you're against the truckers, that you have to know, anyone who has read even a small bit of history knows that you should be very afraid when a government exercises extraordinary powers against one group, a certain group of people, because you and your group will surely be next.
Yeah, that's an excellent point here, actually, and it's a sort of slippery path towards totalitarianism here. And it's very disturbing that we're seeing this actually just north of the border in Canada, a nation that has fought in so many wars for the defense of liberty and freedom. You now have a government that is taking away those freedoms. Also, it's a government, frankly, that is, also advancing outdated and ludicrous sort of, COVID, mask mandates, etc. Policies that, in fact, have been now rejected completely by the British government across the Atlantic. They removed all COVID restrictions over in the UK. And I think many in Britain, just as they are here in the United States, would be absolutely appalled by the moves taken by the Canadian government. Also disturbing as well is a collusion between the Canadian government and big tech companies as well to shut down freedom of speech, to close down bank accounts, funding sources, and so on. This is not how a free society operates. We should all be concerned here about what is happening in Canada. It's a very, very dark day, I think, for the Canadian people. And these moves by Justin Trudeau should be strongly condemned by all who believe in the principles of liberty and individual freedom.
Based on these emergency orders, the government can seize the personal bank accounts and freeze the accounts of people who even suspected of helping or supporting the blockade. So essentially, your bank account could get frozen if you gave money to these truckers. And that's the point. What kind of damage will that do to, and you will never see it. You will see the individuals potentially on TV and talking to newspapers, but what damage would this do to the truckers? People are looking at potential financial ruin. And I wonder if these politicians, if Trudeau and his ilk hadn't seen what they could do with the extraordinary COVID powers, which the truckers are protesting, would he have ever even thought about this?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And what you'll see in the Canadian government do is the sort of thing that you would expect in Russia or China, not in a nation like Canada that is a free democratic society here. And it's absolutely astonishing that the Canadian government is invoking the sort of powers that you would expect to be used against terrorists, basically, and they're now using them against truckers who are fighting the COVID restrictions. And as you point out, I think the last 2 years, you've seen the rise of big government policies, draconian policies across the free world, actually. And Canada is a perfect example of that. And at the end of the day, these restrictions are about power. They're about suppressing freedom and liberty, and they're dangerous. And anyone who believes in a free society should oppose these kinds of measures. And we have seen the rise in authoritarian style policies in relation to COVID. We're now seeing many governments across the world, rejecting firmly these kinds of policies. The British government, for example, has been the world leader in rejecting this kind of approach. And I would hope that, Canada comes to its senses here, or the Canadian government comes to its senses, because I think the Canadian people are full of good sense. But they will not accept, I think, this kind of creeping authoritarianism, which is absolutely antithetical to the ideals and principles of a free society. And I'm no doubt, actually, my former boss, Margaret Thatcher, would have been absolutely appalled to see this happening in Canada, a country she loved very dearly. And I do think that Justin Trudeau is out of touch, actually, with not only the Canadian people but with the free world as a whole. And he's just mimicking the actions of dangerous, dictatorial style regimes. This is not how a free democratic society should function at all. And Justin Trudeau, I think, has gone down an extremely dangerous, reckless path that is fundamentally as well anti-Canadian.
All because this haircut with an ego couldn't bother to talk to these truckers in the first place. That was his first mistake among many. Nile Gardiner, good to see you, my friend, always.
Great to see you.
Thank you so much.